So although it might be appealing, we get driven away from revealed preference and we get driven towards stated preferences. Now, immediately, we've got potential difficulties. You're asking people, so essentially, what value do you place on this outcome? And immediately, there's many potential sources of bias. We've looked at some stated preference approach already today. Time trade-off is a stated preference approach. We're giving people a hypothetical choice. Remain in this particular health state for 10 years or move to a better health state, but for a shorter time. Stated preference. Now, a particular area of stated preference has again, so much jargon, but has the jargon of contingent valuation. And essentially, the term contingent valuation comes from the idea that usually we have markets and we can observe in the market what people are paying for particular goods or services. In health, we don't really have a market. You don't go out and buy yourself some health. It'd be a nice idea if we could. Who would then, the government could wither away on, well, they wouldn't have to worry about health care. I'm facetious. There would still be some issues about fairness, but we don't have markets for health. We have markets for health care to a limited extent, but most of them are highly regulated and thus somewhat distorted. So the idea with the stated preference is contingent on there being a market. How would you value this outcome? That's where the contingent bit comes. But we don't actually have any markets where you can buy a sort of a healthy heart or buy the absence of diabetes. And the most common contingent valuation method or set of methods come under the label or heading willingness to pay. And so I want to look particularly at willingness to pay approaches. Now, I could give you the economic theory, but that would really be not the thing to do. But it's very simple what's going on. Economists want to compare life without the change with a change. And we could be in some initial position. These are called indifference curves. These measure combinations of goods that give us the same value. And so different combinations of X and Y give us particular value. If we had more income, we could buy bigger combinations and get more benefit. And so the whole issue here of willingness to pay is comparing our starting point with some end point. And in this case, we've just changed a price, and that's the change, but it could be any sort of change. Comparing the starting point with the end point, we want to know how much better off we are after the change. We want to know what's the distance between these two curves. And there's two approaches here. One way, we ask a question and say, look, if we make this change that makes you better off, how much money can we take away from you so that you're just as well off as you were originally? I'll repeat that because it sounds a bit like a sort of tongue twister almost. Think of this change that makes you better off. Now, if we are willing to make this change for you, how much money can we take from you so that in the new situation, you'd be as well off as you were originally? And that's one way of looking at willingness to pay. The second is just a related thing. And then in this case, we're saying, if we don't give you the change, if we don't give you the treatment, how much money would we have to give you to make you as well off as if you had got the treatment? Because if you'd had this change, if you've been made better off, you're at a higher level of well-being. If we don't make any change, if we don't treat you, but instead give you money, how much money would we have to give you? This would put a lot of doctors and nurses out of business if we did do this, because instead of trying to fix people's health problems, we would just say, look, you've got this health problem. How much money would make you feel as happy as if we got rid of the health problem? You could shut hospitals. You'd have to, but yeah. Now, there's some underlying theory there, but don't worry about it. But we've got two choices here. We either consider where people are now, or we consider the new position, the better position. And if we consider where they are now, we're then saying, well, how much money can we take away from you and leave you as well off as you are now? Or if we consider the new position, the better position, we're saying, how much money would we have to give you to make you better off without actually doing the treatment? So that's willingness to pay. So there's various attempts to elicit people's willingness to pay, or indeed their maximum willingness to pay. There's open-ended questions, there's payment cards, there's dichotomous choice. This is sometimes referred to as take it or leave it. There's dichotomous choice with follow-up, and there's something called bidding games. These are probably best explained with some examples. So first of all, here's a payment card. This is an example from a Norwegian study, hence NOK, Norwegian krona. And with a payment card, you simply present individuals with a list of values, and then you ask a question. You're trying to identify what's the maximum amount they'd be willing to pay for something. So you have to describe the something that's on offer. And then in this particular study, they asked individuals to put a tick if they were definitely willing to pay that amount, put a cross if they definitely wouldn't pay it, and then circle the amount which they felt was the maximum they would pay. So that's a payment card approach. Here's an example of a dichotomous choice with an open-ended follow-up, a little bit of text. So you have to describe the thing that's on offer. In this particular case, it's something called COS, controlled ovarian stimulation. So imagine the hypothetical situation in which your physician offers you a COS treatment that, compared with another available COS treatment, has the following characteristics. So the offer is that this method will give you something better than your current method. A 1 to 2% gain in the probability of a successful pregnancy. The technology is being presented as a pre-filled pen that makes administration of treatment easier, more comfortable, safer, quicker, and more discreet. You can see there's a sort of marketing campaign going on here. 50% reduced or 50% smaller chance of redness or discomfort at the injection site, so on. Safer in terms of smaller risks of causing allergy or infection. And so the question, and this is the dichotomous choice question, given a cost treatment option with these characteristics, that is this much better than the current treatment, would you be willing to pay 1,200 euros per cycle? So it's dichotomous choice in the sense it's a yes/no. Would you be willing to pay this amount? Yes or no. So dichotomous choice. And then depending on the respondent's answer, if they were asked yes, or if they answered yes, they're then asked, so what's the maximum you'd be willing to pay for a product with these characteristics? If they'd responded no, again they're asked, so what's the maximum you would be willing to pay? And that's an open-ended question. Typically, open-ended questions are very hard to answer. Open-ended willingness to pay questions. Dichotomous choice are generally thought much easier, partly because dichotomous choice is a bit like real life. Real life, we go into the supermarket and there's a particular price on different goods. And we reach out and take it and then pay for it, or we don't pay for it. So it's a dichotomous choice. Another example, and I have to own up here, this is by Dong et al., and I'm part of et al. This was an interesting collaboration. We were looking at willingness to pay for community-based health insurance in Burkina Faso. For those of you who don't know, Burkina Faso is in sub-Saharan Africa. It's a little bit west of Nigeria, a bit east of, no, a bit north of Ghana, and a bit south of Mali. It's sort of, I don't want to be unfair to people from Burkina Faso, but if you're looking for the middle of nowhere, it's probably in the middle of nowhere. As with many low-income countries, there's a huge challenge getting enough resources into the health sector. So somebody had the bright idea, let's see if we could sell them, maybe not sell them, if we could interest them in community-based health insurance. And so as one strand of this research program, they wanted to do a willingness to pay study for community-based health insurance. The research group was centered at University of Heidelberg in Germany, but the lead researcher on this was Henjing Dong from China. And then me. They asked for some advice about willingness to pay. So this is an example of ultimately what we might call a bidding game, or also take it or leave it study. So we interviewed, or the research team interviewed, 1,100 adults, and they were randomly assigned a starting price. The package, the community-based health insurance, was described to them, what was involved, what benefits would be available. And then these 1,100 adults were assigned randomly a starting price between 2,000 and 8,000 franc CFA, which is equivalent to about 3 to 12 euros, which I think is about 300 yen to 1,200 yen. Okay, we're in that sort of zone. Now, if the individual said yes to the first price, they were then offered a higher price. If they said no to the first price, they were then offered a lower price. And you went on offering them higher or lower prices until, as it were, they flipped. So if they kept saying yes, you kept raising the amount, and then once they said no, you stopped. Or if they kept saying no, you kept lowering the amount until they said yes. It's a sort of torture. It's called a bidding game, but it's not much fun. But this does provide two values. It provides the first answer, the yes or no, it's a dichotomous choice, or take it or leave it valuation, and it provides the final answer, so it's the bidding game estimate. Okay.